is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Awaken, the Children of Divinity, Book 1, Chapters 6, 7, 8, and 9. In these chapters, Jordan gets her first day in training, and it turns out that there is a dude here who does not like ladies and is targeting her to try and get her to quit. To which Jordan replies, "With all due respect, sir, shut the fuck up." And I am here for it. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Heather for commissioning this episode. Heather is here in the chat. Hi, Heather. Reminder, Heather's husband wrote this book, and when I put the post up about how this crowdcast was coming up, I said, check out me covering these chapters of a book that was written by a listener's husband, and it's actually good. I don't think I said actually, but like when I say, oh, it's written by somebody, I think a lot of people are going to be like, oh, well, you know, and not pay attention to it. But I'm really enjoying it. And so I hope people will actually listen to this and be interested in listening to it. So, or be interested in reading it. I said listening to it like it was an audio book, but I'm reading it in my Kindle. So these chapters are really interesting because we're starting to get the first glimpses of another group that was working with the Russian that we met last time. And full disclosure, guys, and to Heather also, the last recording covering this book was March 16th. So April, May, so yeah, it's been almost exactly 3 months. We have another couple episodes that are already scheduled. So you know, there won't be such a huge delay again, but I will have forgotten some character names. So if Heather, you want to help me out, I remember Jordan's name. That's it. Pretty much. So I'm going to need you to occasionally jump in and help me remember occasionally names and also like minor plot points. So the last section, reminder, there had been this Russian dude who was being trained to be a security guard, or so the actual security guard thought. And it turns out this dude was part of an operation, and ideally he was supposed to get this guy away from the area where they were stealing shit. And instead, this dude insisted on being a hero, and he goes over there, and I think, does he get like ripped in half? I feel like it wasn't that, but it was like a pretty brutal death that shocked me at the time because it was simultaneously really violent, and also the strength required to accomplish it was just a lot. Gets his throat slit. Thank you, Heather. That's what it is. She says, would you like me to send you notes like Austin and Brennan do for Song of Ice and Fire in Dresden? You know what? Yeah, I'll say yes for just the next episode, but probably you don't need to do it every time because it'll be a little bit more consistent after that. But yeah, if you don't mind, that would probably be helpful to have a little crib sheet of character names and whatnot. So yeah, it turns out that these guys are part of like a group of mercenaries. It's sort of weird because the guy who is in charge, and I'm going to try and pronounce his name, Tretiak, Konstantin Tretiak. He seems to sort of take it personally when the guy who hired him treats them like they're mercenaries for hire. But that seems like what they are. So I don't really know if it's just that he prefers to think of them as something else, but that he's not being honest with himself, or if there is a little bit more to them, and that this just happens to be the way the man he's working with treats them, and that's why he's so resentful of it. But anyway, he is being hired to handle some other thefts that something that is, as we will get to later, pretty significant and pointing to this dude knowing all about the Awakened and doing some kind of weird experimentation on his own time. Okay. Heather says, Trechek considers himself superior to everyone, so it's a meeting of two massive egos. Okay. And I have some thoughts on Trechek later, so we will get to them. Okay, we start off with chapter 6, and here is a point where I am going to give Heather's husband some props, because I got worried. The chapter starts. Jordan stood in front of the antique, full-length floor mirror, her short dark hair still wet from the shower as she studied her naked form. And I was like, oh no. Oh no. Is it going to be her breasts drained from her, like fucking whatever. He does not do that. Amen. I'm so pleased that I don't have to get on his case for this. Instead, she is just thinking about all of the things that she has been doing over the month off that she took with her fiance, and basically that she's out of training, and she's just sort of considering how well she's going to be able to jump back into shit immediately. And in the background, so to speak, her fiance Brian is ranting about how he has been relocated for his operation, his mission, what's the word? Because he's not on a mission. Let's see. Assignment. That's the one he says. His assignment. So I don't like to say mission when it's not really that, pointed at a job. And I love him. All they say is that someone of high authority changed them. High authority? That's it? Was it God? Because it wasn't the Queen. It wasn't Parliament. And I can't think of any higher authorities in this country. Jordan, are you listening to me? And Jordan is feeling a little bit guilty because she knows what happened. And she can't tell him anything. And he's so agitated. And there's not anything to be done except try and calm him and get him to just cope with reality. And there's this moment here where I really enjoy. He is talking to her. So you're not going to tell me what you're up to, Brian replied tersely. Correct. I can't tell you. And you know that. Do you tell me absolutely everything about your work? I know for a fact you don't. And he says something about how a month has not been enough time. And she's like, okay, no. But we did have a fucking awesome month, you have to admit. And it says, aside from the more intimate moments and climbing in Italy, they had been hiking in Scotland and gone to no less than 3 dinner parties with friends. Though the parties were less to her liking than Brian's, she still enjoyed seeing Brian turn on his charm with their friends and the opportunity to talk current events and politics, not to mention being called his fiancé. Mundane things in her world of intrigue and action, but things that reminded her she could be a normal person from time to time. Jordan felt grounded once more, and like she was actually on the way to being married. It wasn't just a role being assumed, or some sort of childhood game played with her sisters. And I liked that. It's interesting to get reminded, especially later when she's really being put through it, that as much as she is not somebody for whom marriage is a life goal, right? That's clearly not the kind of person she is. For some people, it genuinely is. Getting married and having kids is part of the end game for them. That's not her deal. And so because it's not, it's easy to see somebody like that who is getting married as not really caring as much as other people might. And I appreciate being reminded that while it isn't to her what it is to some people, that doesn't mean that she doesn't really care about this guy. And that doesn't mean that she isn't invested in the relationship and looking forward to having some downtime, which she thinks about later. Even though they've had this month together, a month isn't enough, especially when you're rarely able to see a person anyway. So he tells her to promise she'll be careful, and she promises. And I know I've said this before, but I'll make sure to ring you when I can, or if I can't do that, I'll write. Have I ever failed to keep in touch? The all too familiar response made Brian grip her chin firmly and turn Jordan's gaze to his. I worry about you, Jordan. I know you can handle yourself. I do. It just doesn't make me feel any better when I can't be there with you. It's my job to protect you. You're going to be my wife. She let her gaze rest on Brian's and brought a hand up to touch his clean-shaven face. Jordan quickly bit back her usual response, the terse one about being better trained and more experienced than Brian in these sorts of matters. I love you. Brian's mouth flowed from a stern pursing of lips to a charming smile. And you evade again. Well played, he replied, a distinct tone of annoyance in his voice, despite the contradictory expression. Jordan immediately regretted the fact that she didn't do a better job of assuaging Brian's concerns. Relationships weren't her forte, and unlike being in the field in the thick of it, she felt these sorts of situations were beyond her at times. I wasn't intending to come off that way. I don't know what more I can say to reassure you, Brian. Girl, I relate. I am not awesome at being reassuring. Like, it's weird, actually, because I was talking about this with Rashawn, and I consider myself to sometimes be kind of a negative person. But Rashawn has pointed out more than once that I'm not actually. I am pretty pragmatic, and I try and be prepared. But I actually am a pretty optimistic person. I get excited about things. I look forward to things. I plan things, which is inherently hopeful, you know? So it is sort of weird how bad I am at inspiring optimism in other people. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that I take comfort in a very different thing than a lot of people do. So I will say what I think is comforting to somebody because it works for me. And I don't understand that I can be kind of a weirdo about what I find comforting, actually. So to a person listening, it doesn't sound optimistic at all, actually. But to me, it is, because that's how my mind can work sometimes. So it's weird because I wish so much that when I were talking to somebody that is having a hard time seeing a positive future for themselves, I wish that I could get across more the faith that I have that things will get better for them. And it's so difficult to do without sounding really trite and dismissive and sounding almost like I'm dodging it. This moment with her where she just doesn't know what to say, so she says, I love you. Guilty. I've done that a lot, actually, many times, so much. That's just like, I want to help, and I'm like, I can either say this thing that sounds like I got it out of a fortune cookie because it's just nothing. I can say what I'm actually thinking, which I know doesn't really help most people. I have a sort of weird brain. Or I can do a sort of sidestep and try and just redirect it and redirect the energy somewhere else. And it works about this well a lot of the time. I have more success with it than you'd think. But, you know, if somebody knows you really well and you do this, they can tell that you're not really like talking to them. You're just talking at them in a way. You're trying to quiet them. Honestly, is what's happening. She's trying to get him to like calm down and shut up. And I'm sure that saying it that way sounds a little bit harsh, but there are times when you're talking to somebody that you love that's sort of getting themselves worked up. You know what I mean? And you need to stop that fucking train before it begins to pick up too much momentum, because once it begins to really get going, there's no pulling it back. So even though saying you're trying to get them to shut up sounds like you're just trying to shut them up, it's more like you're trying to keep them from spiraling sometimes. Because you know that either A, they're incorrect, but they're going to get themselves convinced of this thing. Or B, there isn't a good answer. And if they get themselves too worked up and you let them, then nothing you say, like already nothing you say is going to help. But if they get themselves too upset, the fact that you have nothing to say that will help is going to seem so much worse later. So you have to kind of, like just get them to not go in that direction in the first place. And here, like I said, she knows what's going on and he's just really freaking out about it. And there's not anything to be done. She knows what's happening and can't tell him, and that's it. And he knows, but he's like mad at her. Guy, don't marry a fucking super spy then. Look, he doesn't know she's a super spy, but like he knows she's a super spy. He knows. Come on. So, 30 minutes later, she's getting into this car, and this dude is named Lawrence, and the drive is going to be a couple of hours. And this was a nice little way to insert some story about her family here. So she asks where they're going, and he says, Porton Down. Heather, is that a real place? I'm going to read this thing. She says it is. Okay. Intrigued, Jordan sat back in her seat. Porton Down was home to DSTL, or Defense Science and Technology Laboratory, and what exactly went on there was subject to much conjecture. So this is like our Area 51, it sounds like. It was known that chemical weapon research was conducted there when it was first opened in 1916, as well as the fact that more than one scientific company called the 7,000-acre reservation home. There were even rumors of tests on human subjects and studies on supposed UAP, or unidentified aerial phenomena, UFOs as the Yanks called them. Can we just talk about the fact that they call it UAP instead of UFO? Now, first of all, unidentified aerial phenomena is like 1,000% more precise a name. And I really wish that we used that instead of UFO. Because first of all, UFOs are sort of treated as if you say you saw a UFO, that you are saying you saw a flying saucer. And that is not what that means. But people 100% take it that way, which is incredibly frustrating. And second of all, unidentified flying object, you're already assuming shit. You don't know that that was an object, and you don't know that it was flying. Unidentified aerial phenomena, on the other hand, is so much more, it was in the air. Somebody saw a thing that was weird in the air. That's it. Because, yeah, what if it's just like some sort of heat lightning or aurora borealis in your kitchen? Just any kind of suggestion that people make about it wasn't a UFO, it was this. Well, that's still a UFO because it's still unidentified. But if it is this other thing, then it wasn't even flying and it wasn't even an object. So unidentified aerial phenomena, I think, is like just better. And I really wish that we would adopt that instead. And I am surprised at the fact that we've like taken on and embraced UFO as much as we have when it really isn't actually helpful in any way. So I was surprised at my own reaction because I didn't know that they called it something different over there. And a lot of times when you see a different acronym for something, you get a little bit like, oh, they call it that. Like, I tend to be very much like, well, ours is better. I don't know what that is. But my immediate reaction was like, oh, why do we call it the other thing? This makes sense. So Jordan had never been there herself, but she knew a few people who had been, and they were required to keep mum on anything they saw. She supposed that if people with extraordinary abilities were being trained and used by the British government, Porton Down was the most likely place to house them. So she picks up her phone because she's getting a call. I love the fact that it's a Hello Kitty ringtone because her sister put it in. And I have never heard the Hello Kitty theme song, I don't think, so I don't know what that sounds like. But evidently Lawrence, the driver, recognizes it, and he sort of smiles to himself, which I thought was cute. And it is her youngest sister, Jill. She calls her Jillian, but Jill keeps being like, no, it's Jill. And we get a little background here from Jordan. Their mother was like not really there for them a lot, as it turns out. And Jordan is worried about Jill because Jordan and her sisters growing up all had each other. But Jill being the youngest, all the sisters have moved out and moved on, and Jill is the only one left. So the fact that she doesn't really have anybody to talk to is a little concerning to Jordan. And she plans to like talk to her mother about it at some point and just be like, are you actually like giving your kid some attention? Because she's calling me and just unloading for 2 hours about everything that's going on in her life, which I don't mind. I want to know, but it really gives the impression she hasn't had anybody to tell this stuff to this whole time, which, it's interesting because I didn't grow up with sisters. I had a mother who was present, but like, it was a little bit weird because she tried to be my friend because she was so young. And so I had a weird relationship with my mom that a lot of other girls like at my school couldn't relate to. But I've met many other women since then who got raised by very young moms, and they understand what I mean when I say that. And so I wonder what it would be like to really not have anybody around to talk to. And I have to imagine that's what fucking people get into LiveJournal and Tumblr and shit, just some place to put things. So she says at this point, aside from the fact that I'm on my 8th cup of coffee and fragging Burks like they were free, I'm ringing you on a most urgent matter. I had to go check what fragging Burks meant. And this led me to think that Jill was also a spy, but it turns out that she's playing a video game. So that's what's going on there. But I definitely got very confused about Jill's deal for a minute. I didn't realize how normal she is. And she is. She is planning to go to school, as it turns out, to be a doctor. And Jordan's sort of relieved to hear that Jill is intending anything, honestly. Jordan didn't feel like Jill had a lot of direction. And look, she's 17 years old. She shouldn't have a lot of direction, let's be honest. We really wish that our kids had direction because it makes us feel better to think that they are on a safe path that has some sort of like measurable accomplishment on it, that especially being a doctor, you feel like, okay, they're going to be able to make a living. But at 17, she is still very likely to change her mind at any second. So just don't rely on that too much, Jordan. That's all I'm saying. And Jill also is saying how Jordan's mother is starting to get antsy over the fact that Jordan's allegedly engaged, but she hasn't even set a date yet. And Jill says basically that her mom has been breathing down everybody else's necks about it. And if you don't get your ass together and come up with a date, we're going to have been driven insane by this bitch before you're done. And I rather enjoyed this because I am lucky. Both times that I got married, Brendan's family were very hands-off. They kind of didn't really want us to even have a wedding because they considered it a waste of money, which was a huge influence on why I didn't have a wedding, and I regretted that. But they really just like contributed a little bit of money and tried to help, but they were not involved. Getting married this time, Owen's grandparents are very uninvolved. Again, they are being hands-off about the whole thing and letting me do what I want to do. We're not like, they're not paying for anything. We're paying for everything ourselves. But I really wonder what this is like, because there are so many horror stories about this kind of thing with parents getting involved and being really pushy about wedding plans and stuff. And I am so curious what it would be like. I had a couple of friends down here got married a few years ago, and the bride was evidently barely involved in the planning, and it was the mother-in-law who did everything. And the bride wasn't even mad about it. She didn't really care that much about the wedding. She wanted to get married, but the actual wedding, she was just sort of like, whatever. So when the mother-in-law stepped in and was like, I'll do it, she said, good, fine, and like completely left it all to her. And I am just so not that kind of person that a family member wanting to like being really pushy about a date and then wanting to plan stuff themselves is just so wild to me. I just I don't know. So many things that I can't relate to. First, having family that gives a shit. And secondly, me not giving that much of a shit, you know? But yeah, anyway, Jordan says, I can't give you a date because, like, I'm on this assignment. I have no idea when Brian's going to be done with whatever he's doing. So I'll let you know when I know, but I can't tell you right now. And eventually she winds down her conversation with Jill. And here it is. Let's see. I'm trying to find the spot. Yeah, here it is. As good a parent as their father Cassidy was, a young woman needed her mother. There were just some things that fathers couldn't truly understand about their daughters, like that first breakup or the pressures that society put on women when it came to beauty or behavior. All of Jordan's sisters, even Alessa, had made time for Jill in their lives, which helped strengthen their bond. Now that all of the sisters except Jill were out on their own, Jordan wondered what her mother was thinking by letting an impressionable 17-year-old have so little of her time. So yeah, I'm curious what the deal is with her mom, because they just, like, she sort of takes it for granted her mom isn't involved. So what's she doing? What's her deal, you know? So she signs off, calls her Jill, which Jill takes as a very good, like a kind of a victory for herself, because she kept calling her Jillian. And then we get a sort of look at this facility that she's pulling up to. There is heavy security outside, and they are both asked to present identification, of course, as they pull up. But as they continue in, they keep getting, like, additional scans and additional checks, and there's just so much, like, it's double, triple, quadruple checks to just really make sure. And there's this moment here. The sedan pulled into the lot of a building that was marked as Porton Down Waste Management Facility B. Outside the building were several well-worn, rust-colored garbage trucks designed for hauling rubbish, marked with the PDWM on the doors. Several more idled in a line, waiting to deposit their sensitive waste into massive industrial mashers and shredders so that nothing of use was able to be gleaned from them. What was recyclable was set aside for special handling in a large bay, which is where her driver turned in. He rolled up his window fully just as the effluvious stench of garbage made its way into the cabin. There's bodies over there, right? I just have to assume they be having dead bodies because they sketchy, right? I am assuming that's what it is. Ew, like, and don't get me wrong, regular garbage stinks too. I mean, it's nasty. So even if there aren't dead bodies, I'm not saying like, oh, it can only smell that bad if there's rotting bodies. If there are meat eaters in this facility, there's rotting bodies over there either way. Let's be real. But I'm just saying, I feel like this was mentioned for a reason, and that it's because of gross things like that. So this is when they get scanned by a laser, whole thing. And they pull in, and she gets introduced to Colonel Shaw, who will be the one that sort of handles her from here on out. Colonel Tristan Shaw. I've always liked the name Tristan. And he says, I'll be overseeing your training. Today will be the formal induction process and a tour of the facility. Tomorrow we're going to see what you can do with an exercise or two, and you'll get a full medical workup. Later on, when she's with her doctor, he's like, I really wish that they would not do the fighting before the workup, because, like, that feels stupid. But I guess they have their dumb traditions, so fine. And he mentions that her file says she usually likes to work alone, and she's going to have to, like, unlearn that, to which she says that she grew up with a bunch of sisters, and she does know how to be a team player if she has to. And it turns out he knew her dad, or knows her dad. And this man really admires her dad and is expecting a lot from her due to who she's related to. And there's a mention, as he's leading her through, I won't go over all of the details about how this place is set up, but it's specifically mentioned that she is counting the paces from the door to different rooms, in case she has to navigate them without being able to see where she is going. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, I can't imagine being able to carry on a conversation and do, like, just be a normal person while also counting steps and actually remembering the steps. And I really wonder, like, because I am somebody who plans in my head without realizing I'm doing it. I wonder if I would be any good at this kind of job, or if trying to do too many things in my brain, just sounding sheerly overwhelming, means that I would be super bad at it. I admire that she's thinking this far ahead. That's just like a smart move. But anyway, they go into this exercise room, and there is a pneumatic weightlifting machine that allows people to safely lift, bench, whatever, tons, literally weight measured in tons, because that is the kind of super being we are dealing with here. Now, we get a reminder of some of her abilities. She is a fast healer. She can turn invisible. What else does Jordan have going for her, Heather? Because apparently the super strength thing, it seems like she's like maybe a little bit stronger than the usual person, but like she seems pretty shocked over how strong this dude is. What is this guy's name? Douglas. So I don't think she's able to do anything like what he can do, which, that's fine. She can't have everything. But yeah, 40 tons is what Douglas is doing. And Douglas is a little bit of I don't want to say lech, because he's very mischievous with it. It doesn't feel like he's being gross. There's another guy named Young who she talks about later, and that guy is actually lecherous, and she's super uncomfortable with that dude. And he's also, that guy is like a pretty boy. So I wouldn't be surprised if he is just sort of assuming that she's going to be into him, and he's about to get a bit of a surprise there, buddy. Let's see. Heather says she has enhanced senses and superhuman speed. She does have greater than human strength, but nothing like Douglas. Okay. Fun fact, the character of Sergeant Douglas is loosely based on the personality of actor Aaron Douglas of Battlestar Galactica fame. Let me look up who that is, because I am so bad with actor names. Aaron Douglas, Battlestar Galactica. Oh, this guy. Okay, yeah. I have a weird thing with this dude because he looks so much like the first man that I was ever engaged to, who was such a dick. But in the show, he is a very nice dude. And that's fun. She says you can practically play a drinking game with his appearances. He's also a real life sweetheart. Oh, okay. That's cool. So yeah, this dude makes it very clear a couple times that her being the first woman on the team is going to be a welcome change according to him, but it's just really emphasizing to us the fact that she is going to be the first woman, and that there have been more than one previous that got sort of drilled out, literally. So we go to another room and we hear McIntyre and Portsmouth talking to one another. And Portsmouth is a misogynist, and he is trying to cloak that he's a misogynist in a classist thing also, and says that she is from a good family, in quotes, which means that they're only looking to, he calls them hobby warriors. And he says they just want to pin some service ribbons on a uniform so they look fancy at parties. They also get people killed. And McIntyre is just really like, it's clear that he's super frustrated because he wants this dude to give her a fucking chance, but he can't just like, his word is final. So eventually it does come down to like, man, just run her through her fucking thing. I don't know what you're arguing with me for. But as he says later on, this man's opinion matters a lot to the crew. So if she doesn't get that guy's seal of approval, it's like as good as not getting any at all. And so McIntyre is trying to be sort of diplomatic and hear the guy's concerns, but he's also aware Portsmouth is just not like okay with women. He just doesn't trust women. And he says this thing, no disrespect intended, but adding a piece of fluff like her to the squadron just seems politically motivated. I know we've taken a lot of guff because we've turned away every bird that comes here. They just aren't fit to serve in the field, not at this level. What about that Simons woman from the Marines? She couldn't keep her sodding legs closed. Hastings was also useless. Remember her, how she broke down when she got a little harsh language? They just don't have the balls to handle this job. No ability to emotionally distance themselves from the work, or they want to shag everything they can find. I'm sure she'd do well in public relations or intel. She's got a lovely voice and patience if she can deal with Douglas for more than 30 seconds. So this is really interesting because what he is saying about previous women sounds on the face of it like they weren't suited, but you can't trust what he says happened. So she couldn't keep her sodding legs closed. Is that true? Or was she raped, sir? Because that fucking happens when there is one woman in a crew of men. And we know that. The number of rapes that happen now that women are part of the military are astronomical, and they just don't get dealt with at all. So just the whole way that he describes this, it can't be trusted because of the tone that he takes and what we know. And then Hastings was useless. Remember her, how she broke down when she got a little harsh language. Now, it's one thing to try to be hard on somebody, but it's another thing to target someone and make it explicit that you don't want them here and that you hope they fail when you are supposed to be on their team. And this is the kind of thing that really happens. It happens with women. It happens with people of color. The whole comment that he makes about how I think that adding her is politically motivated. I mean, that's like verbatim shit that people say about casting actors who are non-white and non-men. It's just always like, oh, the woke police came in and they forced them to diversify when that's not supposed to even be the point. It's just always the same fucking whining. But they think we're the whiners. It's remarkable how incredibly like tone deaf these people are, and they have no self-awareness. So him saying like she couldn't put up with some tough language, I would really like to see the way he handles men in contrast to how he handles women, because he's claiming that she couldn't put up with it. But did you do that to the men? Because it doesn't sound like you do this to the men. It sounds like you go after women in a particular way that is specifically vicious and misogynistic, and they let you. And that's that. It's not like you aren't actually subjecting them to equal testing. And a lot of guys would justify that by saying, well, as a woman, the challenges that you face in the field are also going to be a lot harder and a lot different. So we're just trying to prepare you. Shut up. Shut up. No, that's not it. You know that's not it. Shut up. Trying to act like, oh, I'm doing this for your own good. Fuck you. That's not it. And you know that's not it. So stop it. So, yeah, see, Heather says, my money is on Young being a sexual predator toward the first woman he names. That was exactly my sense, is like, I bet she was assaulted, and this guy is trying to act like she was just out here fucking everybody. I am 100% certain that's not what the fuck happened. Because women know better. than to jump on a team that has all men and immediately sleep with one of the men. We are already hyper aware of being objectified and seen as sexual beings when we aren't trying to be sexual. So the vast majority of women on a team with only men would not sleep with anyone because we know how immediately that is going to lose the respect of the whole team. So yeah, no, he's just such a liar. I hate him. So anyway, so in the end, Ethan just basically is like, you're just going to have to fucking sit back and watch what happens and report back with how she actually performs and stop just assuming shit. So then we jump to the next chapter, and I really need to speed up. Holy shit, I only have 15 minutes left. This is the part with Tretiak, when he is being led in to meet, what is this guy's name? I feel like I want to say Ian, but is that the other guy's name? I think I got that mixed up. He is being led in by a secretary, and he has this like really heightened sense of smell. Mr. Spears is the man that he's meeting. And he can smell that this woman has breast implants, which is wild. I don't know why that got my attention so bad, but like, that's really, really freaky. And he can tell this woman's afraid of him. And when he thinks about that she's afraid of him, there's this moment here. Women like Karen feared him, and that fear, that weakness, repulsed him. And then later on, when he's talking to Spears, it says, where is it? I'm trying to find it. Okay, here it is. That in the man simply watched Tretiak as if he had all the time in the world to wait for a decision. He had no fear, and that was something Tretiak disliked indeed. So, bitch, what do you want? You're like, ugh, I hate when people are afraid of me. Ugh, I don't like it when people aren't afraid of me. Shut up, you are such a bitch. Stop it. Ugh. So, yeah, he says he wants them to intercept a shipment of delicate, rare materials being delivered to the port of London next month, going to, obviously, the facility that Jordan is currently at. I'll need the materials delivered to America within 2 weeks of their acquisition. And Tretiak agrees to this, even though, like I said, he doesn't really like the attitude that this guy has towards him and his crew. And he says that Tretiak says that he's intending to interdict them. Is it interdict or interdict? Because I know indicting looks like indicting, but then you say indict. So I can't tell if interdicting. Okay, it's dick. Thank you, Heather. But yeah, that is what he says is the better way to make sure that none of the materials are damaged. And he says explicitly, water is no barrier to my people. And that feels like we're going to find out some wild shit that they might be able to do. He is apparently called Crimson Shark. And I'm like, ooh, I can't wait to see what this motherfucker can do. So then we get Chapter 8. Jordan is in the midst of what turns out to be sort of a rite of passage for any new recruit. She is getting the ever-loving shit beat out of her by Colonel Shaw. And it turns out that Colonel Shaw has some sort of power. By the end of this, she still hasn't figured out what it is. She has figured out the timing of it so that she can eventually defend herself and attack back. But in the meantime, everybody's sort of enjoying her getting her ass whipped because they themselves had their ass whipped. So it's just one of those things that, like, it's not like they particularly want her to be hurt. It's more that it's reassuring to know you aren't the only one who had your ass handed to you. You know, this is like hazing when you join a frat or something, and it's just a power play. You just like getting to be the one on top for a fucking change. And, he won't explain what it is he can do, which makes sense. As he puts it, you're not going to have anybody fucking telling you what their abilities are in the field. So why would I fucking tell you now? Like, no. And she gets to the point where she is able to figure out that there's like a 3-second maximum of time that he can do it for, or that's in between when he can do it. There's like a time limit. And eventually she manages to get him down, and she puts him out of commission. Like, I think he goes completely unconscious, or maybe just up against the line of unconscious. And it's interesting because you'd think that this was a win. But when she talks to Shaw later, she realizes that he doesn't seem as impressed as she thought he would, considering she's the only person who has ever won a fight against him. And she feels like rather than making it clear that she was able to see through one of the weaknesses in his ability, instead she sort of like let herself be overcome by her competitiveness, and that he could see that she was rattled by losing more than she was putting her mind to work figuring him out. And so he's a little disappointed, despite the fact that she won. And I thought that was a pretty interesting observation. I liked that she could distinguish that just winning isn't everything, and that they might be looking for something more than that from her. And at the same time, she really appreciates the fact that despite being beaten by her, Shaw isn't offended, because she sort of expected, based on the way that other men have reacted from being creamed by her. Ooh, didn't mean it to sound like that. I take it all back. You know what I mean. She expected him to be resentful and defensive, and instead he's just taking it in stride. And she's like, wow, I have not met a man who's fucking like secure, I guess. So that's nice. And he escorts her over to her meeting with her doctor, who's going to be doing the workup on her. And his name is Lyndon. This is, those of you who follow the other Unspoiled, or Spoil Me's specifically, actually. One of the series I'm covering is Cradle by Will White. It's the name of the series. And the main character of that series is named Lyndon. So all I could picture here is this like very tall, overly polite dude who's extremely badass but has no idea, which is what Lyndon is in the Cradle series. And I don't know that that's necessarily accurate, but that's what's in my head, and it is there to stay. I can't help it. But Lyndon's fun because I think in a lot of stuff, when you have a doctor's checkup with a person who's like a superhero, the doctors are often really clinical and detached, and they sort of behave as if they are so rational that what the abilities they like come across in their patients just don't faze them anymore. And Dr. Lyndon is much more excitable. She's asking like where her abilities come from, and he's like, that is such a good question. We have no idea. That is weird, right? I know, but we really don't. It's crazy. He's like just excited and interested and curious. And this really lines up a lot more for me in what I have seen from scientists and, you know, medical professionals that are in experimental stuff, is that they have this sort of, I can't wait to find out kind of attitude. They're not distant, you know, they're not detached, because they wouldn't be as good at their job, you know? And so I like the fact that he isn't portrayed as just this sort of like, lift your right hand, create a fireball, thank you, next. You know, he's like out here going, let me poke you. Does this do anything? And they put her through a ton of weird tests. One of the ones that she dislikes the most being a smell test. And it turns out she does have an elevated sense of smell, but not to the level that he thinks she's capable of. And he asks her, at one point she can smell fish, and he asks what kind. And she's like, how the fuck, what? I don't know. And he says you should be able to tell from the stronger estrogen levels in the sample, which I'm like, I really want to know what estrogen smells like, actually. What's that? It's quite fine to be strong, fast, and beautiful, sir. You have the ability to smell in a far greater spectrum than the average human, and you need to begin learning what things smell like at deeper levels. You should be able to differentiate between scents, male, female, animal types, explosive types. It's not just rubbish that I spout to make myself seem more important or charmingly quirky. And they are going to be teaching her all of that as time goes on. And like I said, she asked where the power comes from. They really don't know. He's talking about, mythology and whether or not any of that has roots in what she's able to do. And he says that their calculations say as many as almost 75% of the population has the capacity to awaken. But they don't know what triggers it. And they have tried forced triggering, and it hasn't worked at all. It has actually hurt people and killed people. And it says, if the awakened beings were acting publicly, humanity would rise up like a terrible monster, fearful and green with envy, and strike them down if they couldn't have that power for themselves. Of course, this will eventually change. Someday the scales will tip. So yeah, this is an interesting thing where, he is very certain of this. And the scales can maybe tip at any time, considering they say up to 75% of the population is potentially capable. Then, wow, it's maybe not so distant future. And he talks about how, they aren't the only ones who know about this. There are lots of organizations and governments around the world working with people who have these abilities, and nobody has been able to figure out where it comes from or how to trigger it. And when she asks how the artificial triggering went, he's horrible mutations, cancers, blindness, insanity, and an entire range of human frailties enhanced and magnified by every experiment tried. So that sucks. And let's see. I'm sure Colonel Shaw is having his brother get you all sorted in the systems as we speak. Brother? Jordan replied. Yes, Lieutenant Shaw. He was at your initiation. Tall fellow, blonde, friendly. He's the team information hound. As such, he likes to make certain you have all of the information particulars you'll need in regard to your job. So, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to Chapter 9 when she is getting put through her paces. There is a mission, and it turns out this is all like a simulation. It's a projection of some kind. I don't know if it's VR, but he is in her ear fucking taunting her while she's trying to complete this. And at one point he almost gets to her. Faster, Dovey. You're not tired yet, are you, princess? I was told you've more endurance than an elephant. I'd be disappointed if you were put out by all of this training. If you are, by all means, speak to the director and he'll find you something more to your liking. Perhaps handling documents in the file room? Is that your lower lip quivering, Law? About to cry? Show me some tears, woman. I know you want to. I know you want to run home to your mum and dad and get a hug. Are you still lying about? Do you want me to call it off? Your ladyship had best get going. It wouldn't do for you to not carry your share of the load, would it? Then again, if you were a proper soldier, a man, all of this would be like having a pint at the pub with your mates. I can send you home now. Do you want that, Law? A warm bed and a spot of brandy in front of the fireplace? And I enjoy, part of Jordan did want that. Yeah, there's a reason that shit works is because, well, we're human beings and we would like to have a comfy time and be with the people that we like and drink and just enjoy ourselves. But this is when she comes back with all due respect, Sergeant, shut the fuck up. Your blathering is interfering with my hearing. Ah, queen. We stand a queen. So, this is when she jumps off the top of a building, and the highest she's ever jumped down without hurting herself was 5 floors, but she is 15 floors up now, and she decides that she is just going to go for it and hope for the best. The landing was painfully jarring, but she managed to keep her feet under her. The target she was chasing came down the stairs and had a startled look on his face as he nearly ran into Jordan's raised weapon. Viper to control, the target is down. I love this. Portsmouth guided the observation platform down from nearly the ceiling. Would you ever attempt that sort of stunt during a real mission, Law? Yes, Sergeant, if that was what's needed to complete the mission. How did you know you wouldn't break both your legs when you landed? I didn't, Sergeant, Jordan said, and shrugged. That seemed to stump the old soldier for a moment, but only for a moment. What's it going to take, Law? He said in a voice so low. Take for what, Sergeant Portsmouth? For you to throw in the towel. You know you'd rather be with your rich fiancé. All you have to do is give the word, and I'll have you back home in 24 hours, and in Moscow with Agincourt in 48. I'm fine here, Sergeant Portsmouth. I'm going to finish the program. Portsmouth's face tightened as annoyance had its way with his patience. The older man mastered it quickly and renewed his assault on Jordan's resolve. No doubt a man of means like the good ambassador will find his comfort somewhere with someone else if you aren't around. It's been done for hundreds of years with those types, hasn't it? Jordan pulled off innocent far better than she expected. Do you mean men, Sergeant? And he just stops and it's like, and I love that so much. She's just like, are you saying that y'all ain't shit? I must be misunderstanding. That can't be what you meant. Just that dudes suck? That's not it. Is it? It might be what you mean. So then we go to Tristan, and he is watching and thinking about how she fine, and that if it weren't incredibly inappropriate, he'd actually be pretty interested in Jordan. But he feels a little bit sad because she's clearly going to qualify for this program. And if she weren't going to be, one of his subordinates, maybe he could actually approach her. Hint, Tristan, no, you can't, because she is engaged. But yeah, he's a little bit like, oh man, like I'm glad that she's going to actually make it, but also that sucks for me. And McIntyre is here being like, well, I really thought that Portsmouth was going to break her for a second. And I don't really understand why you let him get away with treating women the way that you do. And McIntyre says, the men respect Portsmouth's judgment of both character and capability. And it carries more weight with the team than yours or even mine. And yeah, they just have a discussion here about the pros and cons of Portsmouth as a person. And Shaw ends it with, hey, I think you said I have 6 months to get her ready, but I honestly think I can do it in much less time than that. And then the last thing, this section is when Tristan mentions Colonel Shaw comes in here, right? Yeah, I think, Shaw's the one that was saying that he likes her. Tristan is Shaw. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Heather. So yeah, he says, let's see. McIntyre says, we've been getting reports about stolen medical material and that they are something that would have to be used for a genetics project. And Colonel Shaw asks what sort, and he says, apparently, some experimental suspension medium called Safehold Gamma was in the last stolen shipment, and Linden feels the only real use for it is to contain a completed genetic resequencing agent that uses a nanobiochemical organism. I believe you. That's all I got. Don't know anything about most of that, but I just know it is a dangerous thing for those people to have, and we don't want them to take it, and that's enough for me. But yeah. So that's essentially what he is, telling him to keep an eye on. Once they get the report to you, sit down with Linden and assemble a list of likely targets, divide the squadron as needed, and put our people on security detail for any key shipments. So, we're going to have an encounter with them Russians soon. I'm excited about it. All right, I have to wrap up, but thank you again so much to Heather for commissioning this. And thank you all very much for listening. We have another episode coming up on August 10th, so just a little under a month away, and then another one on August 13th. I don't think that finishes out the book, if I'm not mistaken. I think there's still more than that, but I could be wrong. It does not. Okay. But yeah, that's I'm excited that I get to read more pretty soon, so that's cool. And I really don't know, I don't know what's going to happen. I do not have any idea. I will have to, I'm trying to come up with maybe next, but no, I'm just hoping to see a Russian man that turns into a shark like Victor Crumb, but more successfully. All right, I have to wrap up, but thank you again, and I will be seeing you soon with 50 more pages. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.